The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. In a small village, not far from a river, there is a quiet place with green hills and trees. About 2 miles from this village, there is a small valley between high hills. It is one of the most quiet places in the world. A small stream of water runs through it, and you can only hear birds sometimes. This valley has the name of Sleepy Hollow, and people say that there is something strange about this place. Some say a doctor put a spell on it many years ago. Others say an old man with special powers did something there before the country was found. All we know is that the people who live there often see and hear strange things. The most famous story is about a man on a horse who does not have a head. Some say he is the ghost of a soldier who lost his head in a war. He rides at night, and people see him near the church and in the valley. His body is in the church ground, and he rides fast to find his head and return before morning. Everyone in the area knows this story and calls him the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. In this place, about 30 years ago, a man named Ichabod Crane lived. He was a teacher for the children there. He was from Connecticut. The name Crane was good for him because he was very tall and thin, with small shoulders, long arms and legs. His head was small, with big ears, big green eyes, and a long nose. His school was small, and he was a good teacher. He was kind to weak children, but strict with strong ones. He did this for the parents, he said, and told the children they would thank him one day. He was also a music teacher, and made money teaching young people how to sing. On Sundays he would sing in the church, and his voice was the loudest. The teacher was an important man among the women in the area. They thought he was better than the local men. When he came to a house, there would be special food for him. He was very happy with all the young women. He would walk with them on Sundays, or show them things in the church ground, or walk with many of them near the river. The local men wished they were like him. Because he moved from house to house, he also carried news and stories. People were always happy to see him. The women thought he was very smart because he had read many books, including one about witches. He loved strange stories, and living in this special place made him believe them even more. No story was too strange for him. After school, he would often sit by the stream and read old stories until it was too dark to see. He also loved to spend winter evenings with the old women, listening to their stories about ghosts and the Headless Horseman. He would tell them stories about witches and strange things in the sky, and would tell them that the world turns around, which surprised them. But when he had to walk home after these evenings, he was very afraid. Every tree and sound made him think of ghosts and the Headless Horseman. But these were only night fears. During the day, he was fine, and he would have been happy if he had not met something that was more trouble than all ghosts. A woman. Among the students who came to learn music one evening each week was Katrina Van Tassel, the only child of a rich farmer. She was a beautiful young woman of 18, famous not only for her beauty, but also for her father's money. She was also a bit of a flirt, as you could see from her clothes, which were a mix of old and new styles. She wore gold from her great-grandmother, and a short skirt to show her pretty feet. Ichabod Crane fell in love with Katrina, especially after he visited her home. Her father, Baltus Van Tassel, was a happy, kind farmer. He was happy with his money, but not proud of it. His home was near the river, in a green and quiet place. As Ichabod looked at the big green land, the rich fields, and the trees with red fruit around the warm home of Van Tassel, his heart wanted to marry the young woman who would have all this one day. When he went into the house, he fell in love completely. It was a big old home. Inside, there were many old and new things, chairs and tables that looked like mirrors, silver things and nice plates. From the moment Ichabod saw all these nice things, his mind was not at peace. He only wanted to win the heart of the beautiful daughter of Van Tassel. But this was not easy. Ichabod had to win the heart of a country girl, who had many men who liked her. These men watched each other, and were ready to fight any new man who came. Among these men, the most dangerous was a strong, loud man called Brom van Brunt. He was the hero of the country. He was strong, with short black hair, and a face that was not bad. He had a mix of fun and power in his look. From his big, strong body, he got the name Brom Bones. He was famous for his knowledge and skill with horses. He was first at all races. He was always ready for a fight or for fun. In cold weather, he wore a fur hat. Sometimes he and his friends would ride past farms at night, making noise. The people in the area both liked and were afraid of him. When anything bad happened, people said Brom Bones was behind it. This wild hero had for some time liked the beautiful Katrina. His way of showing love was like a bear, but people said she did not say no to him. When his horse was at Van Tassel's home on Sunday night, a sign that he was with her, all other men went away. This was the dangerous man Ichabod had to fight against. A stronger man would have been afraid, and a wiser man would have given up. But Ichabod had a good mix of being able to change and being able to continue. To have fought with his enemy in the open would have been crazy. Ichabod took a quiet way. As a singing teacher, he went to the farmhouse often. Balt Van Tassel loved his daughter more than his pipe and let her do what she wanted. His wife was too busy with the house and the animals. So, while the busy mother was in the house, Balt would sit and smoke. In the evening, Ichabod would talk with the daughter under the big tree, or walk with her in the evening time. Brom, who had some fighter spirit, wanted to fight Ichabod for the woman, but Ichabod was too afraid of Brom's power. He had heard Brom say he would hurt him badly. This made Brom angry, and he started to play bad jokes on Ichabod. He and his friends went into Ichabod's school at night and turned everything upside down. Brom also made fun of Ichabod in front of Katrina. This went on for some time. On a nice afternoon, Ichabod sat on his tall chair in his small school. His students were all reading their books or quietly talking. The quiet was broken by a man who came on a horse to the school door with an invitation for Ichabod to come to a party at Van Tassel's home that evening. Everything was now busy in the school. The students were told to finish their work fast. Books were put down, and the whole school was let out early, with children running happily around the green space, happy to be free early. Ichabod fixed his hair with a little broken mirror in the school. He wanted to look good for the woman he liked. He asked for a horse from the old man he lived with, a man called Hans van Ripper, and went out like a man on big adventures. When Ichabod arrived at the house of Van Tassel, many good people from the country were there. Old men, with thin faces, blue socks, big shoes, and metal on their shoes. Their women, in small hats and short clothes. Brom Bones was the big man there, coming on his horse Daredevil, an animal, like him, full of fire and evil. He was the only one who could ride it. He liked animals that are not nice and do things that can hurt the rider. The big room of Van Tassel's house had a big table of food. So many plates of many sweet foods that only the women of this country knew how to make. Ichabod was very happy to eat all of this good food. As he ate, he looked around with his big eyes and thought with a happy feeling that one day he may be the man of all this very good food and house. Soon, the sound of music from the big room called to the dance. Ichabod was happy about his dancing and his singing. The lady he loved was his partner in the dance, and she smiled at all his loving looks, while Brom Bones sat alone in one corner. When the dance was over, Ichabod went to a group of older people who were talking about old times and were telling long stories about the war. But all these were nothing to the stories of ghosts that came next. The area is rich in stories of this kind. The immediate reason for so many strange stories in these parts was because of how near it was to Sleepy Hollow. There was something in the very air that came from that haunted place. It made people dream and think strange things, affecting all the land. Several of the Sleepy Hollow people were at Van Tassel's, and, as usual, were telling their wild and wonderful stories, particularly that about the favorite ghost of Sleepy Hollow, the headless horseman, who had been heard several times lately, moving around the country, and, it was said, tied his horse every night among the graves in the churchyard. The quiet place of this church seemed to be the favorite place of troubled spirits. It stands on a hill, with trees around it, from which its clean, white walls shine out. To look at its grass-covered yard, where the sun seems to sleep so quietly, one would think that there at least the dead might rest in peace. This was one of the favorite places of the headless horseman, and the place where he was most frequently seen. The story was told of old Brower, a man who did not believe in ghosts, how he met the horseman returning from his ride into Sleepy Hollow, and how they went over a hill until they reached the bridge, when the horseman suddenly turned into a skeleton, threw old Brower into the stream, and went away over the treetops with a noise like thunder. After hearing these stories, the old farmers and their families went home. The recent place of noise and fun was all quiet and empty. Only Ichabod stayed behind, to talk alone with Katrina, fully sure that he was now on the high road to success. What happened at this meeting is a mystery, but something must have gone wrong, because he went out, after not a very long time, with an air quite sad and unhappy. Oh, these women! These women! Could that girl have been playing with him? Heaven only knows. He went straight to the stable, got on his horse, heavy-hearted and unhappy, and moved toward home. The hour was as sad as himself. In the dead quiet of midnight, he could even hear the barking of the dog from the opposite side of the Hudson. No signs of life came near him, except for the sad sound of a cricket, or perhaps the deep voice of a frog from a near wetland. All the stories of ghosts that he had heard in the afternoon now came into his memory. The night grew darker and darker. The stars seemed to go deeper in the sky, and clouds sometimes hid them from his sight. He had never felt so lonely and sad. He was now approaching the very place where many of the ghost stories had happened. In the center of the road stood an enormous tree, which rose like a giant above all the other trees of the area, and formed a kind of mark. It was connected with the sad story of the unhappy Andre, who had been taken not far away. As Ichabod approached this awful tree, he began to whistle. He thought his whistle was answered, but it was only wind moving sharply through the dry branches. Suddenly he heard a sound. His teeth moved, and his knees hit against the saddle. It was only the rubbing of one huge branch upon another, as they were moved about by the wind. He passed the tree safely, but new dangers lay before him. About 200 meters from the tree, a small stream crossed the road, and ran into a very dark place, known by the name of Wiley's Swamp. A few rough logs, laid side by side, made a bridge over this stream. On that side of the road, where the stream entered the wood, a group of trees threw a very dark shadow over it. To pass this bridge was the most difficult test. It was at this exact spot that the unhappy Andre was taken, and under the covering of those trees were the strong men hidden who surprised him. This has ever since been thought of as a haunted stream, and terrible are the feelings of the schoolboy who has to pass it alone after dark. As he approached the stream, his heart began to move. He called up all his courage, gave his horse kicks in the sides, and tried to move quickly across the bridge. But instead of moving forward, the animal made a side movement and ran into the fence. Ichabod, whose fears grew with the delay, pulled the reins on the other side and kicked hard with the opposite foot. It was all useless. His horse jumped, but it was only to go to the opposite side of the road into a group of small trees and bushes. The teacher now used both whip and heel upon the thin body of old Gunpowder, who now moved forward, making sounds, but stopped just by the bridge, and nearly sent his rider over his head. Just at this moment, a sound by the side of the bridge caught the ear of Ichabod. In the dark shadow of the trees, on the edge of the stream, he saw something huge, strange, and tall. It did not move, but seemed ready to jump upon the traveler. The hair of the teacher rose upon his head with fear. What was to be done? To turn and run was now too late, and besides, what chance was there of escaping a ghost or a spirit, if such it was, which could ride upon the wings of the wind? Finding some courage, he asked in a shaking voice, "Who are you?" He received no reply. He repeated his question, shaking even more. Still, there was no answer. Once more, he hit the sides of gunpowder, and, shutting his eyes, broke into a song. Just then, the dark object of fear moved, and with a jump, stood at once in the middle of the road. Though the night was dark and awful, the form of the stranger could now be seen. He appeared to be a horseman of large size, and riding on a black horse of great power. He made no move to talk or attack, but kept away on one side of the road, moving along on the blind side of old Gunpowder. Ichabod moved his horse in hopes of leaving him behind. The stranger, however, made his horse go at the same speed. Ichabod pulled up and fell into a walk, thinking to stay behind. The other did the same. His heart began to sink. He tried to start his song again, but his dry tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth, and he could not make a sound. There was something in the quiet of this continuous friend that was strange and very scary. It was soon fearfully explained. On moving up a rise, which showed the form of his fellow traveler against the sky, very tall and covered in a coat, Ichabod was filled with horror on seeing that he was headless. But his horror grew more on seeing that the head, which should have rested on his shoulders, was carried before him on the front of his saddle. His terror grew to a terrible level. He rained kicks and hits upon Gunpowder, hoping by a sudden movement to leave his friend behind. Ichabod's thin clothes moved in the air as he put his long body forward over his horse's head, trying to get away. But the ghost followed him until they reached the road which turns off to Sleepy Hollow. However, Gunpowder made the opposite turn and went down the hill to the left. This road leads through a sandy place, covered by trees for about 400 meters, where it crosses the bridge famous in ghost stories. And just beyond rises the green hill on which stands the white church. As yet, the fear of the horse had given his unskilled rider a lead in the race. But just as he had got halfway through the hollow, the ties of the saddle gave way, and he felt it moving from under him. He caught it in front and tried to hold it, but it was no good. The saddle fell to the ground, and he heard it walked over by his follower. An opening in the trees now made him happy, because he could see the walls of the church under the trees ahead. "If I can reach that bridge," thought Ichabod, "I am safe." Just then, he heard the black horse behind him. He even thought that he felt his hot breath. Another kick in the ribs, and old Gunpowder jumped upon the bridge. He reached the opposite side. And now Ichabod looked behind to see if his follower had disappeared, according to the story, in a flash of fire. Just then he saw the ghost rise in his stirrups, and in the very act of throwing his head at him. Ichabod tried to avoid the terrible thing, but it was too late. It hit his head with a terrible crash. He fell down into the dirt, and the ghost rider passed by like a strong wind. The next morning, the old horse was found without his saddle, quietly eating the grass at his master's gate. Ichabod did not appear at breakfast, and did not appear at dinner. Hans van Ripper now began to feel some worry about the lost teacher. An inquiry was started, and after careful search they came upon his path. In one part of the road leading to the church was found the saddle in the dirt. There were deep marks of horses' feet in the road, and on the bank of a wide part of the stream was found the hat of the unhappy Ichabod, and close beside it a broken pumpkin. The stream was searched, but the body of the teacher wasn't found. The strange event caused much talk at the church on the following Sunday. Groups of people were at the churchyard, at the bridge, and at the spot where the hat and pumpkin had been found. The stories of Brower, of Bones, and a whole group of others were called to mind, and when they had carefully thought about them all, and compared them with the signs of the present case, they shook their heads, and came to the belief that Ichabod had been carried off by the headless horseman. An old farmer, who had been to New York on a visit several years after, and from whom this report of the ghostly adventure was received, brought home the information that Ichabod Crane was still alive, that he had left the area partly through fear of the ghost, and partly because he had been suddenly dismissed by Katrina Van Tassel, that he had moved to a distant part of the country, had studied law, had turned politician, had been elected, and finally had been made a judge of the 10-pound court. Brom Bones married the pretty Katrina shortly after his rival's disappearance, and he always broke into a big laugh at the mention of the story of Ichabod and the pumpkin, which led some to think that he knew more about the matter than he chose to tell. The old country wives, however, say to this day that Ichabod was carried away by supernatural means, and it is a favorite story often told around the area. The bridge became more than ever an object of fear, and that may be the reason why the road has been changed in recent years, so as to approach the church by the border of the small lake. The schoolhouse, being empty, soon fell down and was reported to be haunted by the ghost of the unhappy teacher, whose voice is sometimes heard at a distance, singing a sad song among the quiet places of Sleepy Hollow.